But if you want to do something great with your life, you need to understand the following. Every single person who has done something interesting with their life is often crazy.
What's up, captains? Now, before we dive into today's episode, I have a very exciting announcement. I am now officially accepting applications to work one-on-one with me in the next round of the Captain's Lifestyle program. The next group starts July 1st, and I am only accepting 10 clients. July 1st is exactly halfway through 2021. So if you're not 100% satisfied with the way the first half of the year has gone for both you and your business, this is the perfect opportunity to get things back on track. I work specifically with social entrepreneurs who want to grow their impact, optimize their work-life balance, and fulfill their entrepreneurial vision. We accomplish this by maximizing your health, happiness, and productivity. Over the course of the 3-month program, we cover the 6 pillars of optimized human performance: mindset and brain health, sleep, communication, nutrition, exercise, and biohacks. Basically everything you need to take you and your business from average to excellent. But don't take my word for it. Listen to what my former client, Nori, a financial consultant and founder of a nonprofit organization, has to say. Best decision of my life was signing up. Thanks, Taylor. I mean, come on. On average, my clients are able to increase their time management and productivity by over 300%. Imagine what you could do if you were 300 times more productive than you are right now. What would that even feel like? Well, if you're one of the lucky 10 who get accepted into my program, you'll get to find out for yourself. To start the application process, head over to info.thecaptainslifestyle.com and enter your name and email. Again, that's info.thecaptainslifestyle.com and in your name and email. All right, now on to today's show. Hello, and welcome aboard another episode of the Captain's Lifestyle Podcast. This is your captain speaking, Taylor Morgan. On today's episode, we have another special guest. His name is Brenden Kumarasamy. Brenden is the founder of Master Talk, a YouTube channel he started to help the world master the art of public speaking and communication. And let me tell you, he's a fantastic communicator. So Brenden, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Taylor. It's good to be on.
Yeah, so go ahead and give us a little background about you personally and what got you into the world of public speaking.
Yeah, for sure, man. Happy to. So my story began in university. I used to do these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So other guys my age were playing basketball or football or some other sport. Didn't really understand. It was like a ball with air. It wasn't really my thing. So for me, it was presentations. Kind of like people in chess club, but for me, it was, I guess, presentation club. So I did that competitively for a few years, mostly just to get a job in the corporate world. And what happened in that journey, in that process, is I realized that I had a gift for communication. But most people who are really good at communication tend to use it for something else. They become executives in companies, they become podcasters like yourself, they become maybe people in office, things like that. But I also realized I had a knack for coaching people communication because I was coaching those people in the programs. And then after that, when I started working in my corporate job, I just started making videos in my basement for fun, really my mom's basement to be more specific, where I'm still residing, by the way. So I started making videos in my mom's basement with the phone, didn't think much of it. And then the channel kind of took a form of its own, and here we are today.
Sweet. So what prompted you to, I guess, continue down this? Just because you enjoyed the coaching aspect of it, teaching people how to be better?
Yeah, I think for me, what really pushed me, Taylor, was, the 5 to 10 people that I helped coach kind of in my university days.
Feels good.
Yeah, they're just like, yeah, like I like these videos, man. You're on your couch, you're giving some advice. It sounds pretty good. You should keep doing this. I said, really? You really want me to keep doing this? So it's really for those 5, 10 people. And then, 10 turned into 15, 20. And then now it's a certain number today. But yeah, so that's what happened essentially. And later down the line, and I guess the advice for people is, with a vision, it always starts with a small little seed.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually that seed grows really big. And if you really care about nurturing it, eventually you'll realize the fruits of the labor.
Yeah. And it sounds like you're definitely starting to realize the fruits of that labor, because you kind of brushed past your audience now, but your YouTube has over like 10,000 subscribers, I believe. So that's pretty good. And when did you start the YouTube channel?
It was January of 2019. So I think as of today, it was probably 2.5 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. So that's some pretty good growth, because clearly you know what you're talking about and people want to hear it. I first heard you on Clubhouse, which is a fantastic app. And you were talking about your public speaking, and you obviously, you know, enunciate very well, speak very well. I'm like, I got to have this guy in the show. So my audience is specifically entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, to be even more specific. Why do entrepreneurs need to learn how to communicate effectively? And I don't mean just necessarily, you know, CEOs or people who give presentations. Obviously, they need to learn how to speak properly, but I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs out there don't really understand the importance of communication and getting your point across. So what is it, or why do entrepreneurs, why should they master their talk?
Of course. I love how you phrase that. I would say for me, communication is everything that we do. Whether you're a 5-year-old girl or whether you're a C-suite executive at a company, you're running an amazing movement and idea. Communication is everything. From the board meetings that you host to the conversations you have with your loved ones, every moment of your life is an interaction, which means every moment in your life involves communication. So the way that I think about this, Taylor, is if you want to make a difference in the world, communication is the catalyst that allows you to scale ideas. I'll give you a quick, easy example. Steve Jobs, when he first introduced the iPhone, this was probably in 2007, people thought he was nuts. They're like, what is it? iPhone, the touch screen, where you're saying there's no like hard keyboard, like my BlackBerry. This guy like whack. But because of his exceptional communication skills, he's able to present his vision for a crazy future in a way that people today understand it. So in the same way, in the context of social entrepreneurs, which I'm a big fan of as well, social entrepreneurship is the same game. You have to communicate a couple of things. I won't make it too complicated for today. What happened already, the problem with what's happening already, what does the future look like, and how do you communicate that future in a compelling way so that not only you get investment or new customers, but it's everything. It's convincing your family that what you're doing makes sense and you're not too crazy, convincing investors as well, convincing employees to join and work for you when they could be working a 6-figure job somebody else doing something. So communication is not just about the keynote style, to your point, right? It's not just the keynote CEOs like pitching,
Yeah.
but it's the conversation you have with somebody over dinner to convince them to work for you as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think a lot of the problems that social entrepreneurs face is that a lot of people they might not necessarily understand the problem and why a future without that problem is necessary. So one of my passions is coaching social entrepreneurs who are in the climate change game, or, you know, the plastic pollution, that, you know, any type of environmental issue. And I think a lot of people don't realize the huge problem that will come from plastic pollution, overconsumption, those types of issues. So the founders of these companies, they need to get really good at convincing, you know, restaurant owners, for example, that they should get rid of their plastic to-go utensils and plastic straws and switch over to this, you know, more expensive alternative. You know, a lot of times they don't understand why they would do that because they're just focused on the bottom line. But to your point, they know how to communicate that problem and communicate the future benefits of solving that problem. That's when they start to succeed. So now let's get into some tactics of how we can become better communicators. So even myself, I'm aware that I am not, you know, making eye contact with you directly the whole time. I say ums and ahs. So what are like the top 3 things that you could, like actionable steps that you would say to anybody who wants to become a better communicator?
Right. And let's start with the one you just mentioned, right? The restaurant example, I think is really powerful. The way that I would approach that one from a communication perspective is the number one tip, which is the most important one: understanding your audience. It's one thing to say restaurants have a bottom line and that's all, they're focused on. But it's another one to go, why are they focused on the bottom line? And then when you do more research, you realize, and by the way, it's not to you specifically, just a general, it's a broad
Right.
example to build on what you said. We realize that, as you know very well, restaurants are a very low margin business. So the restaurant day in day is really stressed out because he's like, crap, COVID like shut down my stores. I'm
Yeah.
gonna okay. So that from that perspective, the first thing we can all do as social entrepreneurs is understand the people who are blocking our vision
Mm.
and figuring out the incentive structure around those people. That's why the first tip is have dinner with the people you want to serve.
Mm.
Like, so many of us want to change the world. So many of us want to solve climate change and all these things, but very few of us are willing to have those one-on-one conversations with the people we need to actually get through to get things solved. I'll give you a personal example. One of those challenges I had with communication was, how do I teach my content in a way that a child would understand? And the reason that's very important to me is because I believe the next Elon Musk is probably a 7-year-old girl in Cambodia, and she
Yep.
can't afford me right now. So for me, it's really important, similar to how Gary Vee thinks about content creation. I want to create resources through public speaking. That's why I do what I do, so that she doesn't get to meet me. Hopefully she does,
Mhm.
but better, she gets to learn from me for free. Right. By what? So that when 20, 30 years, when she's like the CEO of X company and she's like, billionaire, whatever, however you want to phrase that, it could be like a nonprofit or something.
Mhm.
She's going to look at me and say, hey, like, I watched this guy's videos and I could relate to him because he was young like me. That's what I shoot for. But if I don't put the effort to have one-on-one conversations with kids, how am I supposed to create solutions that are going to work for them? And that's the foundation of communication. That's why, as a tactic, what I do, I actually have my own kids coaching program, not for money. It's not a money thing.
Yeah.
Just taking my executives' kids, putting them in a batch, and seeing, like, at what moment in the education system does public speaking crack for them? Do they start crying at 10? Do they start crying at 15, 7? A lot of that happens in the class, but I learn a lot from that. So how does this translate back to social entrepreneurs? It translates back into saying, we have these restaurant owners, we have X, Y, Z. Let's start and put on our calendars to have a couple of conversations with them, and let's ask a couple of questions. One, how would you explain your ideas back to me, or my own ideas back to me? Question 2 would be, if you're in my shoes, how would you communicate my ideas better so that people in your segment would understand it better? And then question 3 is saying, is there anything I can do with how I proposed to make this seem better for you? Right. So that let's take a pause there. Also, I'll just go to monologue, but it gives you an idea of how I think about it.
Yeah, no, that is fantastic, because I think that one of the major reasons why a lot of deals don't get made or a lot of arguments are caused is because both sides don't understand each other. They might both be trying to work towards the same thing, but this person sees it differently. This person has another perspective. They both might be trying to go towards the same goal, but because they haven't spent the time to understand each other, then the communication might be off a little bit there. The super common example is politics. I think both, the left and right in America want to make the world a better place, but because they're so, I guess, so dogmatic in their views, and they're not really open to hearing the other side's point of view, I think they just shut out everything that the other side is trying to say. And as you and I know, that's not any way to get things done. You have to listen to the other side, see where they're coming from, and then try to work synergistically towards a better solution. So now let's get into how to build confidence, because I think that's another reason why a lot of people don't like speaking. Public speaking is the number one fear, even more than death, which I think is crazy, because there's really no immediate danger when you're public speaking. I think the fear comes from, back in the day when we were in tribes, if you were speaking and somebody didn't like what you were saying, you get ostracized from the group. And when you're on your own, you die. But now, there's no immediate danger unless there's some crazy person in the crowd who, but that usually doesn't happen. So if there's no immediate danger, let's start with this. Why are people so afraid of public speaking, or just speaking in general, communication in general?
It's a super fascinating theory, one that I didn't think of. But I think what I would say, for me, the reason why I believe most people are scared of communication has nothing to do with them, but the system in which they grew up. Think about this, Taylor. Where have you given most of your presentations?
Me personally, uh, first school, and then now podcasting. But
Right.
school for sure.
School, podcasting, for some it's school work, podcasting for them it's school work.
Mhm.
Right. So I like where you're going with this. So most of the presentations we've given are in school, right? So let's start there. What happens in school? Three things. Well, there's a lot more than three, but let's simmer it down. Number one, you never really get to pick the topic. It's never, hey, Taylor, what do you like to do? But rather, hey, Taylor, you got to give a presentation about Shakespeare and the Renaissance. And you're just like, what's a Renaissance?
Yeah.
What's a So you have to do a presentation on some random thing.
Yeah.
Number two, there's not many great coaching resources in public schools, and that's not the
Right.
teacher's fault. Well, I always like to emphasize that teachers do a great job with what they have, but the challenge is because the student classroom is so big, the teacher doesn't really have time to have one-on-one conversations to work on people's communication skills because they went through the same system themselves and the same issues. So it kind of just perpetuates. Number three is that the presentations are always changing. Whenever you do a presentation, you finish it, and then your immediate next goal is how do I get to the next presentation? Because you don't have one presentation every semester.
Yeah.
You got like 15,000 or something. So you go through one, the next. But we know whenever we want to learn a new skill, whether it's playing a piano, like a new instrument, whether it's cooking something for the first time, the way that we master it is by cutting the same thing, like vegetables. We cut the same vegetables over and over again, and then we cut them better. Instrument, you're a lot better off playing one song really, really, really well because it gives you confidence, to your point, versus saying, hey, let's take 50 songs, throw them in the air, and just try and master all of them. So the key to public speaking, that's a tip that everyone who's listening can implement immediately, is the secret to being exceptional in the shortest period of time is focusing on what I call the repeatable presentation. Do one presentation about your business, let's say, explaining in 5 minutes, and make that the best presentation of your life. And if you do that 25, 50 times, you won't even recognize yourself anymore as a speaker.
Yeah, that's a similar analogy that I teach my clients, because a lot of them, all of them are high achievers. They want to do all these different things, accomplish a lot in business, their personal life, whatever. And one of the major excuses and complaints that I get is, Taylor, I'm trying to do so many different things at once. Like, how can I do all these things? And yes, there are some strategies to where we can improve your time management to where you can do a little bit, in each category. But I suggest that you don't. I say pick one thing, get really good at that one thing, and then you can move on to the next thing, because you can't be world class at multiple different things. If you want to be world class, pick one thing. You can be really fucking good at two things. You can be great at three things. You can be good at four things. You can be average at five things. And the more things you start to do, the less competent you get at all those things. So I say pick these, core group of things that you really want to do, and then go all in on those things. So it's the same thing that you said, like, practice one thing over and over again until you get really good at that. So now let me ask you, how can they start to build confidence towards that? So repetition, you're right, practice does start to build that confidence, but let's say they don't even want to start that. Let's say they don't even want to not even get on stage, but talk to people in public.
Absolutely. I think the first step is always having dinner with the person you want to serve. Like, as you can probably
Going back
tell
to
from
getting to know them.
Right. And I could give a more specific example here. Think about me. I'm not 35 years old, right? You could tell from looking at me. I started YouTube when I was maybe 22.
Mm-hmm.
And today I'm 25 and I coach CEOs. Like, how did that happen? Like,
Yep.
Brenden, where did you get the confidence? Like, what was it? Just woke up and said, no, that's not what I did. Is I focused first on the people I was comfortable serving. So for me, I was super scared to coach people like you or people who are very successful. So I started with kids. I just coached people who are younger than me. Then after I coached people who are the same age as me. Then I coached people who are older than me. Then we became managers, directors, vice presidents, CEOs. And then it became, I should probably speak in front of 100 people and impact more lives in that way. So it's a gradual process. You don't just skyrocket there, right? It's one step at a time. So for me, that's one piece. The other piece is really getting to know the person you want to help. So if you're at a company, and I see most people are social entrepreneurs, this is way easier for you to do. You really need to have dinner with people. And once again, personal example. I knew that I was going to take Master Talk seriously the day that I saw a 9-year-old girl crying because she was scared of getting a presentation. Like I was in one of my kids' things, and I was noticed it was a 10-year-old boy, and there's been other examples, who just started crying in my class. And I just went, oh my God, like this is such a big problem. And there's so many kids who won't have access to me just by nature of time. So I need to create free resources, and this is important, Taylor, regardless of what the population thinks. Because a lot of people told me I couldn't do what I do today. Because they're like, well, you're a kid. Like, how are you supposed to coach someone who's worked longer in the company, longer than you've been alive on communication? How does that make sense? So for me I needed to cancel out that noise, not for those executives. Obviously, most of them are those executives today, but that was not the focus. The focus was saying, look, there's a 15-year-old girl in Utah right now who's scared of presentations and doesn't have access to communication tools because most speech coaches on YouTube or on the app in general, or who shared knowledge for free in general, are above the age of 40. So she can't relate to those people. So notice through that example, Taylor, and I could spend 30 minutes just talking about that girl or that example, but I don't want to bore you too much. But I think the example I want to drive here is notice how very specific I am about that person. So that's where the confidence comes from, not just because I know who that person is, but because I've met that person. I've had a breakfast with them. I just use this as an example. Coffee, I've casual conversation, name it, whatever you want to name it. But I think that's the exercise most of us need to do. And that's what makes us unstoppable.
Do you think that has to be in person? Like, obviously it would be better if it's in person, but say the person's on the other side of the world. What are some strategies to build that relationship then?
No one's ever asked me. That's fascinating. Definitely, to your point, and I think that's the magic of public speaking. There's no right answer. It's the key to any podcast people listen to in general as advice is never focus on everything that person's saying, because they're speaking from a different frame of mind and in a unique life experience that they have. So what you want to do always when we're listening, this is more for the audience, not you, is always cherry pick the stuff you like of what I'm saying and trash everything you don't like in what I say. Because my goal in this conversation is you take 2 or 3 cherries and you apply. That's the key. So to your question, absolutely. Really depends on the person. Me personally, I love the in-person.
Yeah.
I love getting to know them. It's just more my thing. I like seeing the stress, the happiness. I love seeing the emotion right there because I'm more of a people person. For other people, that might not be the case. It might be an email exchange between 2 people. It might be a Zoom call. It might just be a phone call where you don't even see the person. It might be a comment on a blog that you posted. We're all different. But what I do encourage people to do is the closer you get to the person you want to serve, the closer you can feel them, the closer you can talk to them, the closer you can understand them. And understanding doesn't just mean their name. It means, what are they afraid of? What do they aspire to be? What do they care about? That's when we start to get very clear on who that person is. And for me, it's mostly done in person, but you could also do it through other means for sure.
Yeah. So that seems like, obviously it's a good strategy, but that seems like it would be very time consuming. So what are some strategies to, I guess, maximize that time? Because if, you could spend years getting to know one person, when would you say is kind of the good balance? I mean, I guess blanket answer, this is going to be different for each person, but how do you know when you've cultivated that, at least a good enough relationship with them?
I love how you're pushing the logic on this. This is awesome. I would say for me, the way I would approach it, because I think it's a solid question, is I would have questions ready to start the conversation, similar to what you're doing with me. So yeah, you have an agenda, but you're not married to it. Because if I go on a tangent that you really like, that you didn't expect in the conversation, you go, well, actually, I didn't realize Brenden could just like tailor advice specific to my target audience. Let me keep pushing this, right? So same thing that you're doing with me, but people can do it on a much lower scale, which means you don't have to prepare, watch videos, research people, because most people aren't public figures. But what you can do instead is say, these are 3 questions I know for sure works on everyone. I'm happy to share them. So one question that I always love to ask people is simply, what do you think of my idea?
Mm.
What do you think of what I'm doing? So for example, I'd go
Upfront.
up, yeah, it's just very simple. I
Yeah.
just go up to kids or like nieces and nephews and what do you think about YouTube channels on public speaking? They would just answer with, I love YouTube. They don't know what public speaking is, but they're like, oh, YouTube or YouTuber? Right. So I was like, okay, so this YouTube thing is probably going to work. And then, but to other demographics, people are much older, it would be, okay, but what are you doing with the YouTube channel? What topics are you covering? Did you talk about this? And when they're doing this, I'm taking the notes. Just going, oh, that's a good topic idea. That's a good topic idea. 99% of everything I do on YouTube never comes from me. Never. It always comes from somebody in my audience who goes, hey, Brenden, did you ever think of breaking down individual speakers? And I always reply with, right, I probably should have thought of that one. It's probably a smart idea. And then I implement it. So that's one. Easy, simple. What do you think of my idea? And it's not formal. That's why I like saying dinners. That's why I like saying lunches. Because when you have lunch with your friend, you're not taking a notepad and you're like, well, Taylor, welcome to this meeting. Let's go through before the menu. I would love to ask you my restaurant
Right.
menu of questions. Right, so that's one. The other thing, the other question you can ask as well is if you were me, how would you explain my idea to
Mhm.
yourself? So then they might think about, they might go, well, I don't really get this. I don't really get that. Restaurant owners, well, they don't have that much margin, blah, blah. And then you're like taking notes. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then a third question as well is another simple one. Who else do you know who could help me with this idea that you think would be useful to talk to?
Mm.
Not for business or anything, just useful to talk. Oh, yeah, you got to talk to like my friend who's this director at the sustainability company. He knows a lot. He's really smart. You guys should talk. That's what I did when I was 19 or 20. And I think the key takeaway I want from all of this that I want people to get is if I could do it, why can't you? All of you are social entrepreneurs. You're much wiser than I am. You have a lot more experience in your domains. You've probably spent a decade on this problem that you're focused on. You've probably been passionate about climate change your whole life. If if I can go through the trouble of meeting a couple of people for coffee, imagine the change that you can make in the conversations you can have.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like market research. Just getting to know your ideal client, like really getting to know them, not you speculating what you think, but actually going out and asking those questions. And I've done a similar thing to what you mentioned when I was doing market research for my program. I had an idea of, this is probably what their problems are and how I can solve them. But I got on the phone with a lot of different people and asked them specifically, like, one of the questions was, if I were to make a video on 5 different topics, what topics would you like me to cover? So instead of just guessing what people want, ask them directly. I think that's genius. I think so many people just try to, figure it out for themselves, but ask and you shall receive.
Right. And even more than that, let me push that even further because I love
Mm.
the depth that you're bringing here to this convo. Is my first coaching program, I did it for free. I literally, or I would charge them like something like a small amount. And I would just say, if you're not satisfied at all, give it all back. And I didn't even do anything for the program. We just start week 1 and I just figure it out as we go.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of ups and downs. But at the end of that program, like I had so much feedback on the table. I was like, okay, now I can charge X amount. Now I understand the value of what we're delivering. And you can apply that same analogy to any type of business, product or service based.
So I started the same way. I got my first client before ever having any type of structure to my program. I had an idea of where I wanted it to go, but there was nothing, written out. So I'm kind of jumping grow wings on the way down. Get a client, see that they want it, and then it kind of forces you to like, okay, you have to get this done because somebody's counting on you. Yo, Taylor here. So I'm sure you've heard me harp on sleep and basically every single podcast and video that I put out because it truly is that important. And I'm excited to announce that I've created something very simple and very tactical that you guys can use to start improving your sleep immediately. In fact, it is the fastest way to improve the quality of your sleep and therefore the quality of your life with amazing results after just one single night of implementation. Seriously, this is the same nightly ritual that I personally use, and it's the same strategy that I teach all of my high-performing clients in the Captain's Lifestyle program. It's the 4-3-2-1-30 method, and I'm giving it away to you guys for free. All you have to do is follow the link in my Instagram bio or in the show notes of this podcast, and I'll send it over so you can start sleeping better tonight. But please do not sleep on this offer. It's literally free, so no excuses. Go do it, and sweet dreams. Did you experience imposter syndrome at any time? Do you currently, did you in the past, and how did you overcome that?
Love it. Absolutely. I think imposter syndrome, and what's fascinating about that whole thing is it doesn't matter where you are in life.
Mhm.
You could be all the way at the top, and you could still have imposter syndrome over Bill Gates, right? So,
Yeah.
so it's a never-ending process. I don't personally have it as much as I used to, but I can tell you how I overcame it. Okay, it's just I just call it objectivity,
Mm.
right? So here's the way I think about it. Here's an analogy. Where do you live? Like country or state or
United States, California, Southern
California?
California.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. So let's say I came to Cali, right? And I said, Taylor, I'm here in California for a couple of days. Can you give me directions? Like, where should I go eat? I'm in Southern California. What should I do? You're likely going to respond with, "Hey, Brenden, you could go to this place. I really love the food there. Oh, you got to try this. You got to go to this place, etc." But you're not a tour guide. You're an expert in Southern. Your dad didn't, or your parents didn't invent Southern California. In the same way, by the way, if you came to my home city, which is Montreal, and you said, "Hey, man, I'm in Montreal for a couple of days. What I should do? What should I do?" I was like, "Man, you got to try this chicken place. Unless you're vegan, but if not, definitely try this place. And then you got to go to this sightseeing. Don't go there. It sucks, but go there." Once again, not the expert of Montreal. Even if I was born and raised here my whole life, I'm not the number one. My dad didn't invent the city.
Yeah.
So why is it that when it comes to specific types of information, we're very open about sharing knowledge, but when it comes to our own expertise, the thing we've honed for many, many years, we're suddenly afraid to share it? That's something I've always thought of. And the solution that I can bring forward to this episode is the following. Most people make the mistake of understanding what expertise actually means. Most of us think expertise is having a PhD in our subject. It means having a master's degree, it means having all these things. But the truth is, in my head, expertise is just being one chapter ahead of the next person.
Yep.
And any person that is behind you in that subject, you're qualified to teach. Yeah. So, for example, at the beginning, sure, was I scared of these C-suite people? Absolutely. I still am, maybe to a certain extent. Okay, no worries. Who am I head of in my domain? Well, the 13-year-old girl at this free pro bono event I'm probably know a bit more about communication than she does. In the same way, by the way, or in the same way you, by the way, probably know more about how to facilitate conversation, how to lead podcast interviews in an effective way, interview style, how to coach people on high performance than I do. So I go, perfect. Let me learn something from Taylor. Let me learn something from that 13-year-old girl. That's the key. As long as you're coaching people in your domain of expertise that are previous to the chapter that you are currently at, there's no reason to have imposter syndrome. And just keep doing that and don't focus on anything else. And eventually you'll go from chapter 1 to chapter 56 a lot faster than you thought.
Yeah. So basically don't try to pretend to be somebody or know something that you're not. Right. That's the fastest way to really be an imposter. Then you're actually an imposter. But yeah, I had to overcome the same thing. When I started coaching successful entrepreneurs, it's like, well, why would they trust me? I don't have a multi-million-dollar business, but I'm not coaching them specifically in the business aspect of it. I'm coaching them in the mindset, the health, the happiness, the productivity side of things. And once they optimize all those areas, then obviously their business succeeds. So yeah, just like you said, you don't have to know every single thing about a subject. You just have to be one step ahead of wherever they are. And so, yeah, that was absolutely what helped me overcome my imposter syndrome, especially when I first started out. So to wrap it up, do you have any sort of exercises that we could do live, like with me, to help me get better? Can we do that? You got anything
absolutely.
off the top of your head?
Yeah, of course, something super simple people can do on a daily basis before you eat. So before you have breakfast, before you have lunch, before you have dinner, just do this.
Make a routine out of it.
Yeah. And I'm happy to demonstrate it, of course. We could kind of do a small back and forth. It's called the random word exercise. So essentially what you do is you pick a random word, and I'm sure you probably know that because you've clearly done your homework on me. You just pick a random word, and then it could be like lights or wife or basement or doorknob, and you make a presentation out of it. Do it 5 times a day, 5 minutes a day. And in a month, you'll be a completely different speaker.
I was hoping you picked this one because this was the one that I was most excited to do, but kind of most scared to do because it's the one that is, I guess, most challenging for me. But I frame that to excited because it'll be a fun exercise. So you said you wanted to go first. I pick a random word.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Books.
Sure. You gave me an easy one.
Yeah.
As I'm sitting on my Sunday evening couch, most of you think I'd probably have a bowl of popcorn in my hands or a bar of chocolate to celebrate the rest of my week and what I've accomplished. But no. Got some almonds, got some nuts, and a big fat book. I'm sure many of you are wondering, why is Brenden reading on a Sunday evening? The reason is simple. Because books are a wealth of knowledge. They allow us to learn and share and grow. It allows us to learn a life's worth of information in the span of a few pages. That's the beauty of books. It allows us to share ideas, allows us to learn from some of the brightest people in our lives. All it takes is one passage in one page of a book to change your life. One of my favorite quotes, my favorite book, is that the goal is not to live forever, but rather create something that will. And it was that moment that sparked my journey and what I ended up doing. So my ask for all of you today is not to read a book, but read a page. Page every single day. So that after a few days, you'll realize that I could probably read more than just one page. And then by the time you're done that book, you'll realize that the wealth of knowledge that you seek is lying at your fingertips. That's just an example of random thing.
Wow. So where can I find the rest of that TED Talk?
www. Right. So that's the thing. And I'm happy to give it to you. Most podcasters usually don't have the I don't know how to say this without they have the they don't usually volunteer themselves to do the exercise. Let's put it that way.
No, I'm happy to do it. I think in the Marine Corps, most things that I experience in the civilian world, nothing really scares me anymore, I guess, just because I experienced super stressful situations there. So now it's like, nothing matters. And I actively go out and face my fears. For example, skydiving. I was scared to go skydiving. I bought the tickets to go skydiving because I was scared of it. Turns out it was one of the best experiences of my life. So I find that a lot of times the best ways to grow are on the other side of whatever it is that you're scared of. So it shows that you should go do those things. But real quick, before we move on, or you give me a word to attempt something even remotely similar to what you did, it's almonds, not almonds.
Oh, is it almonds?
I don't know. That just I heard that and I was like, interesting. Probably the Montreal there.
Maybe it's a Canadian thing.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's do it. Shoot me a word.
Your word is destiny.
Destiny. Whew. Palms are sweaty. All right, destiny. So you're sitting here listening to this podcast. You're wondering, where will it take you? Can this podcast bring you any closer to your end goal? I'm not sure. That's something you have to determine for yourself. And nobody else can tell you what your end goal is either. But the thing you have to remember is that it's your goal. It's your destiny. You are in charge of where you want to go in life and what you would like to achieve and the legacy that you would like to leave. So what is your destiny? Don't let anybody else tell you that. You can't read it in a book. You can't watch it on the news. You can't listen to a podcast to determine your destiny. Your destiny is inside of you, and you have to do the deep introspective work to bring it out and fulfill it. That's what I got.
That's amazing, man. That just the fact that you got through that exercise the first time we're doing it is really impressive. And I always like to say when I do the exercise, never compare yourself to me. I've literally done the exercise 2,000 times.
Wow.
And I'm not exaggerating that number. Most people go, oh my God, 2,000 times. But it's also not a big deal. If you do it 5 minutes a day for a year, you'll have done the exercise almost 2,000 times too. right? So that's the key I want to drive is focus on just making yourself better. And I guarantee, and this has happened 100% of the time, the 100th time you do that exercise versus the first one, you're just a rock star.
And for that exercise specifically, what are some of the key benefits that you've noticed?
Oh yeah, the biggest one is you're a lot less scared of public speaking. I'll explain why. For me, like you, I'm sure you learned it in your time in the Marine Corps, is always do the harder thing. That's my focus. So for me, if somebody goes, "Oh, I'm scared to give this presentation that I'm an expert in," I go, "Really? How about you give a presentation they have no expertise in? Talk about avocados for 2 minutes, why don't you?" So whenever they do that hundreds of times, they go, "Well, if I could talk about avocados for 2 minutes, I need to talk about my expertise, really? For like 30, like something I actually know?" Then that presentation becomes a joke.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I feel like it would also help with word association and just coming up with things on the fly, because I think a lot of times people get stuck on what the next thing they're going to say is. But if you practice this improvisation, and also not caring what comes out of your mouth and not caring what other people think, just kind of going with the flow, I think that would be another huge benefit of it. Right. Okay.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right, Brenden, if you had to leave my audience with one key takeaway from everything we've talked about today, what would that be?
I would say something that has nothing to do with communication, but in reality has everything to do with it. And the advice is be insane or be the same. If you want to be like everyone else, that's totally fine. But if you want to do something great with your life, you need to understand the following. Every single person who has done something interesting with their life is often crazy. Yep. Don't you find it odd that a 22-year-old kid started a YouTube channel, not on pranks, not on vlogs, but on public speaking and communication knowledge? And today he coaches executives, but at the same time, still lives in his mother's basement, is literally talking to you on the mattress he sleeps on, and doesn't own a car. How does any of this make any sense? And that, my friends, is the point. When everything in your life makes sense to the only person it should, which is you, you're probably living a great life.
Wow. Great place to leave it. Before we go, tell everybody where they can find more about you, learn how to become a public speaker or just a better communicator.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the first step is definitely the YouTube channel. All you got to do is type Master Talk in one word. You'll be off to the races.
Perfect. All right, Brenden. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and spreading your wisdom and helping me become a better communicator live. That was fun. I got to start doing that more. Yeah, thanks again. And don't forget, live the captain's lifestyle. Peace.